If you end up missing anything, you can always reach back to the website to go ahead and see some of the recordings that are being done. My name is cmintzmyer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Nevada, and I'm also the social emotional counselor for your students. As part as our social emotional counseling team, we have Myra Havilana, who is our social work intern and also supports our students here at Cristo Rey St. So today's webinar will include some of the following. We will be talking about key aspects of teen mental health, 4 strategies in parenting with mental health in mind, and lastly, my contact information. And then if you are here live and participating, then you can enter to win a raffle today. So let's jump in. It's no surprise that being a teenager is tough. Now, being the parent of a teenager might be a little bit even more difficult and confusing and sometimes feel like a roller coaster. Mental health is important overall to well-being, especially during adolescence when there's a lot of different types of changes as far as their hormones and brain development. We go into a little bit more detail into brain development at a later webinar, so stay tuned with that. But mental health can significantly impact your students' success in school, relationships, and their daily life. And parents or families play a crucial role in shaping how your teen is with their mental health. But it's important to get a good feel of what kind of challenges your teen is facing. So let's talk about some key aspects in regards to teen mental health. Well, we have emotional changes that are going on. You have hormonal shifts and brain development, which are affecting that emotional regulation. So if you are noticing that your teen is sometimes going up and down, that's actually normal. And like I said earlier, we'll go over with how brain development goes with a teen at a later webinar. You also have social pressures. At least when I was in school, we didn't have the same type of social pressures, especially with social media, as our teens have now. So they are trying to figure out who they are and who they want to be. So there's a lot of identity formation during this time. They have peer influences, and a lot of that influence also comes from social media. Finally, they have academic stress. So sometimes the pressure to perform well in school, being a part of a lot of extracurricular activities, and planning for the future, and planning for college for our school. This is my second year at Cristo Rey St. Viator, and some of the biggest concerns that I am noticing from our students that bring a lot of students into my office is anxious feelings, low motivation, and low confidence in themselves, sometimes in a social setting, but also sometimes in an academic setting. My hope for families here at Cristo Rey St. Viator is to give you at least 4 strategies in order for you to be able to support your teen in their mental health. Our first strategy is having open and honest communication. So what that entails is creating that safe space. So we want to encourage our teen to have that environment where your teen feels comfortable to share without fear of criticism. So my previous experience in working with teens at an outpatient clinic, a lot of times some of the messaging that I would hear from teens is, oh, if I tell my mom, she's going to get mad or she's going to get angry. If I tell my parents, they're going to start worrying and get angry at me. So sometimes that kind of feeling would prevent some teens from being able to really have that open and honest conversation with some of their family members. Asking open-ended questions. So these are questions that require more of a yes or no, and having them being able to think more about their answers. So instead of asking questions like, how did school go? Or was today an okay day at school? Or did you have a good day at school? where your team can answer yes or no, or maybe they're answering, you can tell them questions like, how are you feeling about math class? The final point is being available. So dedicating that time for those conversations when your teen is actually ready to talk. And for some of our families, that not necessarily might look different depending on the family's work schedule or if there's a lot of drop-offs or pickups. So sometimes those little moments throughout the day, maybe that is late at night, or maybe that conversation is happening on the way to school or during pickup. So being able to be available when those times are there is going to be really important for your team. Continuing with having open and honest conversations, we have active listening. So once you actually get your teen to that moment where they are ready to talk, they want to talk to you about some of the things, active listening. And sometimes this can be easier said than done. The rule of thumb for this is listening more than we are talking, right? Which means avoiding interruption or offering solutions a little bit too quickly. That's not to say that you should never offer solutions, but sometimes it's important to maybe take that as step 2 rather than step 1, and giving your student that space to be able to really talk about what it is that they're going through or what they want to let you know. Our second point is empathy over fixing. Sometimes as a parent, you are wanting to get into a fix-it mode. So because of that, we are offering solutions a little bit too quickly. So sometimes taking a step back and being empathetic with our student as far as that must be really hard, or I understand why you're upset, is going to put you in a better place for your student to feel secure and seen. And lastly, being patient. This one is a really tough one sometimes because we want to know everything that's going on in our student's head, but sometimes things take time, and that is okay. So we want to make sure that our student does feel that safety and that consistency. So even if maybe they're not necessarily ready to talk at that time, that's okay. You can continuously let them know, I'm here and ready to talk whenever you're ready. But at least they know, oh, my parent or my guardian is always there when I need them. So our second strategy is going to be establishing routines. So you might already be doing this, and if you are, that's great. But I want to talk a little bit more about it as well because of the importance of establishing routines. What are the benefits? There's a lot of benefits. The first ones are stability and security, especially if you have a naturally anxious student. Providing those routines and supporting them in those routines is going to make them feel a little bit more stable and feel that sense of security. It also is going to be helping with stress reduction and better sleep and focus, 2 things that your student needs in order to be able to perform well at school. So continuing with established healthy routines, we want to make sure that we're able to incorporate this into our daily life. So depending on that family's particular schedule, you can input some of that practice into family meals. Maybe your family has a routine of having family meals every night, or maybe not. Here at CRSV, we have a lot of families that have multiple things going on. Maybe there's different jobs, or maybe some families have multiple jobs and they're not able to have that traditional dinner at 6 p.m. every night. So maybe for that family, having that consistent family meal where there's that opportunity to talk maybe takes place on Sunday during breakfast. Having a bedtime routine. So we talked about the benefits of having that routine and how it leads to better sleep, while encouraging that essential bedtime routine is also going to be very important, and helping your student having some sort of wind down routine. So normally if a student or any individual is having a tough time falling asleep, usually some of the best practices for that is letting that person know, trying to put their phone away either 30 minutes or an hour before they're actually going to be going to sleep, just because the blue light of some cell phones can really still activate like our brain waves and make it harder for us to fall asleep. So whether that's listening to music before they're going to sleep or reading a book, something calming that your student can do is something that you can encourage them to do in order to have a better sleep experience. The third one is creating a routine, helping your teen build that daily schedule where they have either physical activity, they're making sure that they have nutritious meals. Maybe that means that you and your student are packing sandwiches the night before for the following day. That could be part of the routine, and making sure they're having a consistent bedtime. The fourth one is physical activity. We know from evidence that physical activity supports in mood. We know it supports in having a better outlook. We know it supports better with concentration. So even including something as simple as maybe we take a walk after dinner, or maybe every Saturday the family takes a family hike, or maybe your student has cousins that he or she plays basketball with on Saturdays, but maybe that's a part of that student's routine. So those things are going to be very healthy routines, not only for them, but also for them in a social sense. Now, I think that if you're kind of in a situation where you're not necessarily sure where to start, or your teen is having more mental health challenges at the moment, the best way to start is the routines with physical exercise, nutrition, and sleep. Particularly with sleep, we know our teens need about 8 to 10 hours of sleep in order to be able to function and perform. Lack of sleep can affect their mood, their concentration, and their overall mental health. So that might not happen all the time, right? Some of our students are maybe studying really late, or they're getting home really late from having different extracurricular activities. But the key is that that's not the norm, right? We want our students to be able to maybe there's a day that they are having to stay up a little bit late because of academic things that they're going on. But as long as that is not happening regularly, but if your student is only having 5 hours of sleep every day for weeks at end, that is definitely going to start playing an impact into their mental health. Our third strategy is being able to promote that emotional intelligence. Um, and there's a couple ways to be able to do that. We want our students to be emotionally intelligent. Feelings are a natural part of being human, but a lot of our students have a hard time being able to identify how they're feeling and sometimes what they're feeling. So as a family member, being able to support them in naming that emotion can actually be very helpful. Identifying and labeling that emotion, whether they're feeling excited, frustrated, sad, whatever that may be. Modeling emotional expression. So sometimes it just starts with you as the parent or as the guardian, and being able to model that appropriate emotional expression appropriately, and showing them that it's okay to show your emotions in appropriate setting. Now, for parents, that's not to mean that we come home and we say, oh, I had a terrible day at work, I don't feel good, my coworker did so and so, and then this happened, and then this happened. Your student doesn't need that many details, but having those moments where you're like, I'm feeling a little frustrated today, there are some challenges at work, is the kind of appropriate thing that we should have our students hear, because that lets them know, oh, okay, it's okay to show your feelings. It's okay to say why you're feeling that way. That's a part of our family routine. The third one is validating their emotion. Sometimes students, your teen, wants to be seen. They want to be heard. So sometimes, even if you don't agree, being able to validate those feelings and letting them know that I can see why you're upset. I can see why that would make you unhappy. Even if you don't agree, is still a really good tactic. Even if your student maybe said some things that in anger that they weren't necessarily supposed to be, you can still validate and stay firm with phrases like, I understand why you are upset, or I can see why that would make you upset. However, it's not okay to talk to me in that way. You're still validating their feelings, but you're maintaining that firmness and giving them that expectation and boundary, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. So how can you continue to support your student in some of this emotional intelligence? You can support them in having mindfulness practices. So simple things like taking deep breaths, providing meditation. Nowadays, there's a lot of free apps like Calm that support in mindfulness practices that your student can always download on their phone. Journaling is always a really great way for your student to write down without any judgment how they're feeling. And lastly, any type of creative outlet, whether it's drawing, painting, music, especially if your child is one that is not wanting to express their feelings in words, they can do so in these types of creative outlets, but that is still allowing them that avenue to be able to do so. There's still a lot of different other ones that that support expression, feeling expression, but these are just some of the top ones. And our fourth and final strategy is setting those boundaries and expectations. So why do we want that? We want that because it provides structure. So clear boundaries give a sense of order and predictability for your team. They know what is expected to them and they understand the consequences, and that reduces uncertainty. Again, especially if you have an anxious child, that can support your anxious child in knowing what is expected of them. It also promotes safety. When you provide those limits on screen time and activity, that's always going to help your student with their safety and well-being. And finally, it encourages responsibility. When teens know what is expected of them and the consequences, not always, but they are more likely to take responsibility for their actions and make better choices as a result. So we also know that high school time is that time to transition our students into eventual adulthood. We want to have those clear lines of boundaries and expectations, but on the other hand, we also want to promote that independence. So how can we support the independence, but still have those boundaries and expectations? We can offer guidance, not control. So we're setting those boundaries that they are responsible for and including your teen in those discussions. Don't be afraid to end up, including them, whether it's having conversations such as, you're having a party coming up and we need to talk about what curfew looks like for you. We need to decide that together. I want to tell you some of the points that I feel about with safety, and I want to hear from you of what we think is appropriate. So something like that, where you're including your teen, so then they feel a sense of ownership and they feel respected. So it's a collaboration. Our second point is encouraging decision making. So anywhere where you can, allowing your teen to make those decisions within the established boundaries. Whether the consequences are positive or not, giving them that space to be able to learn from their experiences. There's some things like with safety that are non-negotiable, right? There's no decision making in that. There's no availability for that. Even when it comes to doing chores at home, say that you're thinking, oh, well, they have to do dishes. That's a boundary that's non-negotiable. You can still offer the choice of, you have to do dishes. Do you want to do them now or in 10 minutes? So you're still adding that choice in the middle of having those that parameter of boundaries. Our third one is be consistent. So consistency in enforcing boundary helps develop that trust and stability for your student. And lastly, flexibility. So being open to adjusting those boundaries depending on how your teen is doing and as your teen grows. It's possible that the boundaries and expectations that you set for them as a freshman might change as they get older and become a junior and senior. So just being able to acknowledge that as a parent and acknowledge that that might be the case and that you will have to remain flexible for that. But lastly, it starts with you. being able to model those healthy behaviors. Our students are watching and they are paying attention. We might not think that they are, but they are. The more that you can include that for yourself, especially with how hard it is raising a teen, being able to practice that self-care for yourself, even if your schedule is packed, even if it means that maybe every 2 months for 1 hour, you have that self-care for yourself, but your teen is still noticing that their parent is taking care of themselves and prioritizing their mental health. So in their head, they're like, oh, okay, well, this is just what we do in our family. You know, it might not happen every week, but we take care of ourselves. So that is always going to be important, not just for you as a parent, but also for your teen to be able to see those things. And lastly, being able to have that healthy, those healthy coping tools. So whether that means that maybe you end up getting frustrated at one point and you out loud say, you know what, I'm going to take a deep breath, or I'm going to step away from the conversation just so I can gather my thoughts and come back to it. Your teen is seeing, okay, when we get angry in our family, we take a step or we take a break or we take deep breaths in order to work through what we're going through. So it starts with you and having that modeling for your student, because they will most likely follow those things. So as we wrap up the final part of our webinar, if there's any information or any consult that you need for your child, have questions, please contact me. This is my contact information. Also on our website, if you would like to refer your child, you can always go ahead and fill out the referral form. We have it on our website under social emotional counseling. And you can go ahead and fill that out. And usually by within 48 hours, your child will most likely be seen. And I'll probably give you a call to talk a little bit more about some of your concerns that you wrote down in the referral process. Our next webinar is in November 13th. These are part of a quarterly series. So if you are unable to make it, that's okay. The webinars will be recorded and posted on our website. Our next webinar will be Unlocking the Teen Mind and Understanding Brain Development on November 13th. But thank you so much for joining me and participating in the webinar. And I look forward to seeing you in November 13th.